Okay, now it's working. Hey everyone, hope you're all having a lovely day today. Today we are continuing our discussion. I'm sorry, I'm only now sending Issa our like itinerary for what we're talking about today. So today we're continuing our discussion on the Ava Max song My Head and My Heart. Just kidding. We're continuing our discussion on head faith versus heart faith in a little bit more in depth. Okay, I just sent it. Um
Okay.
and today, more specifically, we're talking about kind of how the whole debate over head faith versus heart faith is stupid and how it's very detrimental to people's faith because some people who are maybe young believers or like new Christians or people who struggle with security hear that and then they're like, "Huh, well, do I have the right one? Do I have head faith or do I have heart faith? Which is the right one?" And then it just creates a lot of issues for a lot of people. Um, so as we said before, and Issa, you can go into a little bit more since you actually did the actual research on this. But to start out, I think we're just going to quickly sum up what we went over last time in regards to the words "my head and my heart," not "my head, my heart," but the word for heart in specifically Jeremiah 17:9. How the word is one and the same in the Hebrew.
Mhm. Fun fact, Ava Max actually is a biblical Hebrew speaker. She wrote it based on that.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know. I know she's a modern artist, but she actually was alive way back when, and
She actually helped Jeremiah write his prophetic
she said, "I
line.
feel a song coming on."
Yeah. And he was just so inspired he had to
But
write
that
it
would probably
down.
be really confusing if she did try to write a song, "My head, my," because if the word was exactly the same, she'd be like, "My same word, am I same word?" Like,
And then everyone would be like,
what?
"Hey, Ava, what are you
Ava?
doing?
What?
What are you talking about?" No, they would probably get it. But
Yeah.
that sounds
So,
so dumb. Hi, Liv. Oh, I
what
hate
is the word?
that.
What is
Greek,
the?
my cardia, my dianoia. Dianoia isn't even like used that often. I don't know much about that one. But anyway,
Anyway, continuing on to the roots. Yeah, so
um,
basically in yeah, Issa, if you want to say the things.
I'm so obnoxious, sorry. Also, Miss Issa finally wore contacts, so no glare anymore. But yes, they come from the same word. The word LEV/B. It's kind of hard to tell
Yeah.
when clearly I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so I'm still figuring out
Yeah.
when to use which
This is
letter.
all very loose research that we just do for fun. For
Yeah,
funsies.
but the entry that I usually am familiar with is spelled LEB, and it refers to the heart, but it also refers to the mind and the understanding and like the will and the seat of like passions and desires and stuff.
Mhm.
So it kind of like folds in the Western definition of like the heart with the emotions and how we kind of would think of it today. I think I use the examples of like you'd hear in speech all the time like, oh, like that broke my heart, or like
Yeah.
my heart is so joyful, or like I for some reason I hate this phrase, but like my heart is full. I don't know why I hate that phrase, but stuff
Yeah,
like
I've
that
heard
you
that
hear people
like
say it
be
all
heard.
the time. I say something maybe I shouldn't say, maybe I shouldn't judge, because I all the time I say that makes my heart go pitter patter. I stole that from my high school band director. But yeah, so we talk about the heart with things like that. And I think you probably have a sense of what I'm getting at,
Mhm.
with like our modern day idea of like the heart and like the symbolism, especially the symbolism that comes with
Mhm.
it, just like through writing and um like artistic, I guess, nuances like in English and other kind of Western languages through the years. Oh, but then on the other side, the concept of the mind, also still in like our current setting, is sort of this like it doesn't really have any connection to the emotions, I guess. I don't
Mhm.
know. Like, um, rather the way that we think of it, it's like, oh, well, when we're making decisions, like don't follow your heart, like follow your reason, like in your head. And like it's where like logic comes from. And I mean,
Mhm.
well, yes, that's true, but like it's like nothing,
Yeah.
if you want to be reasonable in anything you do, if you want to be rational in anything you do, like it's all head and no heart. So
Mhm.
it's like there's this duality, I guess, in like the current modern day thinking of these two like very opposite or like very different concepts of the head. and the heart. Whereas it's kind of funny when you look into Hebrew, they fold kind of everything that we would think on the two sides, they
Yeah.
fold it under one word. And
Mhm.
what makes that funky is the fact that um like trying to think of the right phrase, but like almost like synonyms. It's like if you it, I don't know, I'm like really suddenly I'm just like
This
but
always
like what makes
happens.
yeah, what makes that funky is the idea that like do you catch what I'm saying when I say um if I'm talking about my reason and my rationality with one word, like why would I use the same word to talk about my emotions that are
Mhm.
totally separate, right? They're
Yeah.
totally separate. Or like the very passionate emotions that I could feel, like anger or love. Like, why am I using the same word if they're completely separate things? And so like you raise that question of like maybe they aren't completely separate things, considering the way that the Bible speaks about these kind of two opposing things are actually encompassed by the same word, and like you use a lot of the same speech to talk
Yeah.
about yeah. So and if you really want to get funky with it, look up the Hebrew word nephesh, nephesh, totally different thing, but it's a very
Just for
spicy, very
funsies.
fascinating, very beautiful word. The meanings behind it are very beautiful. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
my spiel on the
yeah,
Hebrew.
yeah. And going off of that, kind of them being one and the same, recently what people will do, excuse me, um, is people will talk about, I've seen this thing, it's on YouTube, on the internet, and some preachers, pastors, etc., will say, well, do you have head faith or heart faith? And kind of make it seem like they're two separate things. And I know for some people, especially young believers or babes in Christ, will hear that and be like, well, what's the correct one? Do I have to have both? I don't feel anything, so do I not have heart faith? Or, some people who, all they do is not all they do is feel, but people who are very emotional, they're like, well, what's head faith, And so, that can be quite detrimental to people's, faith and their spiritual journey. And, they kind of are one and the same. It's just more so a matter of, I think because we were talking about this the other day, and we were saying, I think the misconception of head faith versus heart faith might come because some people are very, very, very emotional and they feel emotions very strongly. Like, I know there are some people who, will be in church and when they're worshiping, they have their hands raised. They are totally into it. They are getting emotional. They just really, really feel such strong emotion to the Lord. And I definitely feel strong emotion to the Lord, but it's never like overwhelming. I'm like I've never been in church where I'm like screaming, pray, like raising my hands, where I feel, just immersed in everything. That doesn't really happen to me. And, I know some people will, also feel that way, like, the same as I do, where it's more so like, logical, or maybe you think a little bit more, think with your head more so, you believe the gospel and you believe it, you comprehend it, but because you're not like totally feeling like again, it's like the expectation of a feeling being associated with salvation and that kind of stuff. And I know that some people, when they, hear that, or when they, hear the word head faith versus heart faith, if they don't have those really strong emotions, they get worried and are like, well, do I have heart faith? Am I supposed to feel something? I was talking with Renee Roland recently, and with I know it's crazy, and that's going up. That video, I think it's actually, this will probably be uploaded after that, but anyway, you can check it out on Revivalist for Christ channel. But I remember one time she said this thing in one of her videos where she said, you know, uh, people saying, believe it in your heart, and like, do you believe it in your heart? And that whole thing, it's like, well, how do I know if I believe it in my heart? And it's like this whole it's what does that even mean? It's like it's either you with belief, you either believe something to be true or you don't believe it to be true. With the gospel, either you believe it or you don't believe it. It's not like, do you believe with your head or do you believe it? Just simple, do you believe it? And I remember she used this example, which I think was amazing, and I'm going to say now, and she said something along the lines of like, look, do you believe that George Washington was the first president of the United States, but do you believe it in your heart? And I thought it was so funny, like, but it's so true. It's like, I'm not thinking about like, do I believe the gospel? Yes, absolutely. But when you believe it in your heart, like, what does that even mean? You either believe it to be true or you don't. Like, when I'm like, you know, you don't have to be thinking about something 24/7 and actively comprehending it in order for you to believe something. Like, for example, when I'm like making food, I'm not thinking about like Jesus Christ died for all my sins and I'm going to heaven. I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, I need to clean up after this, but I'm really hungry and oh my gosh, I can't wait to just eat already. Like
Same.
that's those are the thoughts that are going through my head. Um, I don't know if you can relate, not with the cooking thing, but with the specifically the you know, head faith versus heart faith thing, and like, you know, because like I said, I experience emotion. I promise I do. I'm not a robot, but I don't ever have these overwhelming, consume me fully emotions. I, you know, definitely have moments where I get really, really excited about the gospel, or where I feel really, really passionate about, you know, sharing it with somebody, and I feel really passionate about, you know, doing the work of the Lord, and I feel very, you know, loving towards the Lord, but it's never like this overwhelming, you know, believe it in your heart kind of a thing, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have
I'm
anything to add. What?
I had like a maybe like a clarification you could say is your example of people. I think you mentioned like people worshiping in church is like one thing, and like kind of people being like certain ways, I guess, in their faith. That's like I just wanted to clear up that like um that kind of like is an example of like how we that is an example in the sense that, like, you didn't mean to do this, and you didn't
Mhm.
do this, but just in case. Um, it's like when we look at people who, like, are certain ways in their faith and put them under
Yeah,
these umbrella terms,
a
that's when it
box.
becomes detrimental. And so, like,
Yeah.
you're speaking and, like, giving that example, like, obviously, like, that's not what you were doing and that was not your
Mhm,
intention. But that's, like, it serves to show, like, how that happens, I guess.
mhm,
Um, and, like, you mentioned how the heck did you
yeah.
word it? My memory is, like, not good today.
Well, I
It's
think what
kinda
I
very
said
good, but
before, because when we were talking about this the other day, is like, I think it's a difference not in faith, but a difference in personality, and
yeah,
that's something.
that's what we were talking about when we were planning this. But when, you mentioned, like, a fear, it was like, "Oh, yeah, some people are afraid that, like, oh, I'm not, like, deeply feeling like my friend
Oh,
such and
yeah, yeah,
such.
yeah.
Does that mean, like, I don't have" That's been a huge fear of mine for a long time because, like, if you wanna do the umbrella, you know, the camp terms, I am, like, so far in the head thing, like,
Mhm.
so far, like, it's very unhealthy. And, like, I'm pulling myself out of it. It's great. It's been great.
We're thinkers.
We're Peter in Matthew 14. Not really anymore. I used to be like that, but, um, that was a huge fear of mine because I would constantly be hearing people talk about how, like, "Oh, I was praying the other day and someone or and God just, like, put it on my head." And, like, I think that happens to everybody, like, like, every once in a while.
Yeah,
Like,
of
it happened
course.
to me actually recently, but, like, oh my god, we should do, like, a story time sometime.
Story
But
time.
with stuff like that,
Yes.
like, crazy stuff. But,
Yeah, I'm down.
yeah, like, I would always hear people saying, like, "God just, like, put this on my heart," or, like, "He gave me a verse for you," or, like, I was just in service the other day, and I was just crying, and I was like, "That never happens to me,"
Happens to me, yeah.
I never, like, really feel it. And it's, like, it's a personality thing. It's also, like, everyone has different faiths, like, nobody in my family of 5, like, growing up, we, like, would worship with, like, our hands in our pockets, and, like, at the very most, like, me and my dad would, like, tap our leg, you know, we would do, like, nervous knee, kinda like
Mhm.
my dad's a drummer, so, like, he would, like, bounce his knee kinda thing, like, to the beat, like, that was the max amount of, like, bodily involvement that, like,
Yeah.
any of us would do, and I would always be like, "Oh my god, like, am I not worshiping correctly?" Like, when
Correctly?
I would see yeah,
What
like,
does that
I'd see
even
my
mean?
friends at, like, conferences in college, they'd be like, "La" like, going crazy, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Am I just, like what am I missing? Like, is that, like, how we're supposed to worship?"
Yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah.
was kinda like and it was never like, that was also never me, like, when I was realizing that, like, I was okay to be the way that I am, it was never obviously, it was never folded in with, like, "Oh, my friends have it wrong." Like,
No,
no.
absolutely not.
No, yeah, it was
Exactly, and
just
that's
because of I think because of, like, some, like, minor I don't know, just, like, like, conditioning, that's the word I'm looking for,
mhm,
conditioning of, like, this idea that there's, like a head and a heart, like, kinda thing, even if it wasn't really spoken to me, but just, like, the way that it's taught with, like, different words and, like, different concepts,
mhm,
kind of got it in my head that, like, for me to be a really, rational thinker not to say that people who are heart faithers aren't rational, like not at all. But for me to like be less like on the like the emotion is not as involved in my faith. Like for me to just like not be like in worship like that and like always be like, you know, in tears in my prayer time is like there's nothing wrong obviously with being like
Hmm.
that, but there's also nothing wrong with not being like that. And I tended to get to know, like in college was when I really really got involved in my faith. Like I grew up like it, but I wasn't like super, you know, crazy like crazy. I wasn't super like
Ah!
really dedicated to the Lord until college. And so by then that was when I was getting to know a lot of people, and I tended my faith was like really raised up by people who were like that and who were very like they just had such like a close emotional connection to the Lord. My grandmother's also really like that. And so I grew up with that in a sense, but then I also just like the more I pressed into my faith, like the more I saw that kind of like climate and people's personalities, and it caused me to question like what the heck, like am I doing
Hmm.
something wrong? And it took me a while to realize that like no, not at all. And so obviously what I just said comes from like one experience. You can
Hmm.
flip it. Like I know I'm literally saying like we're not supposed to put people in camps, but
Hmm.
for the sake of like breaking it down,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're
Well, exactly. And
someone
that's what we're doing.
yeah, if you're someone who was like me and you felt like, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong because my hands aren't like, you know, or I'm not always feeling this like insane and like this insane deep emotion connection to
Yeah.
the Lord. If you're like me in that fear, like take take everything that I just said. I'm not gonna repeat it. Take everything that I just said and like use that to like think, you know, hopefully that's things that you've already thought on and like me saying it is like what you need to be assured in it.
Hmm.
But then also from the other side, if you were someone who felt like you grew up and like you were wrong for like, I don't know, if you always had a really emotional connection to the Lord, but like you grew up in a family or like around a church that it was like always, you know, it was always like breaking things down rationally, or like you just like you really wanted to get into the whole connection, like in your heart to the
Hmm.
Lord, but it seemed like everyone was always focusing on their head, then you can take exactly what I said, but like switch it from the other way
Yeah.
around. So
And I think, yeah, and I think a lot of those patterns with growing up with, your hands raised or your hands in your pockets has to do a lot with the environment you were raised in
yeah.
and also what your personality is like. Cause I know, like, I don't come from a very Christian family. Like, like I said, I was raised casual Catholic. And, in church, nobody sings, nobody does anything. Like, or at least when I went to mass when I was little,
Mhm.
people just stood there, and so I grew up thinking that was normal, and then when I went to college, and I went to church for the first time with Isa, I remember being like, everyone's singing. Like, this is so weird. And people would scream like amen at the end of things. And I was like, literally weirdest environment for me because I'd never seen and encountered that before. And I was like, and I remember the church that we went to was still like when before we went in, like I remember my friends were telling me, "Oh, yeah, it's a little bit traditional, just letting you know." And I was like, "That was traditional?" Like, and then there's other places where like, you see these like strobes going and like, mosh pits happening in churches, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't see myself in that environment." Not saying that that's a wrong environment, but that's just not
Yeah.
my vibe. Like if I'm ever at a place where there's flashing lights, I'm like, "Oh, Foster the People concert." But not like, for me, it's very different. I've never actually been to a Foster the People concert that
Yeah, I
will.
was gonna say I thought it was funny that you mentioned how like with the Catholic upbringing and then like going to our church in college
Yeah,
was like, whoa. But for me, I was like, whoa, like
thinking
in
it
the
was like
other
super strict.
direction. I
Yeah,
was kind of yeah, because the church I grew up going to is it's funny. I'm obviously I'm back there now,
hmm.
but Jack also goes there like
I
through
do. I
him.
watch it online and I love it.
Yeah, and so like when I think about the way that that church gets run, and like Jack can only really get involved in it to the degree of like Sunday services, but like
Sunday watching online. I know
yeah,
it
but like
sucks.
I've been going to their young adults gatherings, and like I've been playing like I started playing bass for some things like from
Yeah,
women's ministry,
I'm
and I got to
like,
play it once for YA. So it's like being part of the church at when I was at school and then being part of the church here. It's like I'm seeing how my like personality jives better with the one that I'm at now. And it's
mhm.
that for me, it's a whole nother story. But for a while I was like, oh, like I'm going with my, like, why is this better than the other one? Like, is it because I don't want this one to be better? It's a whole dumb thing, but yeah, like wow, a lot
That
changed for me over the pandemic, like in a good way.
I think it did
I
for a
used
lot
to
of
be
us.
so fearful of so many things, and that was one big one, was like, why am I not really cool with my church and at school anymore? Like, why do I like the one at home? And it just didn't occur to me that it was because, like, people are different people
Mhm.
and they jive with different things, not
Yeah,
because their theology is off and they want to go to the church that serves their
exactly.
personal theology. That's what my fear was. It
Yeah,
was just because my personality
is
is
different.
better fed by this church, and it's
Exactly.
okay.
And
Yeah, like,
and
it's
that is
okay.
something that I really wish people understood. And don't get me wrong, like there are plenty of instances of like, people going to churches because they want to hear what they want to hear, but that is not everybody. And I think it's really toxic. Yes, I'm using that Gen Z term because we're Gen Z. I think it's very toxic to kind of attribute that to everyone, think like, oh, well, you're just going to where you feel the most comfortable because you just want to. No, you're going where you feel the most comfortable, because how can you thrive in an environment that you don't feel comfortable in the sense that, like, my personality is very extroverted, but when I'm in a very overstimulating thing, especially because when I worship or when I am like, praying to God, I like to be zen. I like to be quiet. I like to just be calm. That for me is
Very
like I
nice.
feel the most at peace with God when I am very quiet and calm. Um
Mhm.
and for me, I've never been a fan of like, over like, it could just be because I wasn't raised in it, but also I don't feel like my personality has ever mixed with, people who are raising their hands and, shouting and stuff, because that's not what I'm like. When my relationship with the Lord is very, I don't want to say relaxed, but a very calming relationship
Just
and
chill.
chill. It's
Chill.
chill. Me and God are chill. But that's just kind of not what I vibe with. And it's not because my theology is incorrect or because I'm like, I just want to go to the church but the church that I, watch online right now, it's very, they still have music and worship and all that stuff, but the sermons, I get so much out of them. And, they talk a lot about mental health actually at the church that I'm at, and, a lot of what they like, the vibe of it just is more, and it's so funny because it's not like I'm actually there. Um, but the vibe is a lot calmer and I do a lot better in that sort of environment. And I guess what I was saying, kind of the point of the whole, like, my argument for, like, why the head versus heart faith is stupid. It's not a difference in faith, it's a difference in personality. And personalities can't thrive in, like, certain personalities don't thrive in certain environments.
Mhm.
Just like kind of like how certain people can't kind of mix. I think if you're a human being, you will find that there are certain people who, no matter what, you just for some reason can't jive with them. You just can't, like it. You don't even have to be hostile to one another, but it's like I don't really know if I could be friends with this person because we just have nothing in common. Like same thing, like certain personalities just don't mix, and that's okay. Like we all have different personalities, and that's one of the things that like is so amazing about being a part of the body of Christ, is because everyone is so different. And I think when you try to fit everyone into a certain box, it doesn't work. And that's something that I, get very, upset about, because like, I think in today's day and age, certain times people try to paint Christians as all being like that, or specifically all Christian men being exactly like this and all Christian women being exactly like this. And that unfortunately is just not the case. And then, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, which we will save for another day. But the point being is that it's not a difference in faith, it's a difference in personality, I think, a lot of the time.
Yes, and it's that difference in personality that causes us to put people in these, like, 2 camps that they shouldn't really be put
Yes.
in. I mean, we do it with a whole lot of other stuff,
Yeah,
so
we do it with everything else that exists in the world, but
yeah, and sometimes
yeah.
it's like there's no harm in it. Like, people with, with the Myers-Briggs person, like, there's not
Yeah, the
really any
Myers-Briggs.
harm in, like, looking at, "What's my
Of course.
Myers-Briggs? Like, what's yours? Like,
Exactly.
what is
And even
yours?
that, I'm sorry.
What is yours? I don't know."
I'm an ENFJ. So I'm extroverted, intuition, feeling, and G. I need to look that up. I know that Myers-Briggs, because when I learned about it in psych in college, the Myers-Briggs, it is legitimate, but it's not the best one. I think the best one is the ocean one, which I forget
Yeah,
if
well,
we
it's all general. You can't fit
it's very exactly.
7
It's
billion
16
people into
personality types, and
yeah.
so it's extremely generalized. You're
Yeah,
not going to vibe with every single part of it.
you can't put 7 billion people in the world under 16 or 5, which is the ocean thing,
Exactly.
I think, right? That's like the really big one. Or
Yeah.
or which blew up recently, the Enneagram. You can't fit 7 billion people
Mhm.
under 9 types either.
Oh yeah,
But
the Enneagram,
for
yeah.
curiosity's sake, if you feel like you've smelled it out, I'm interested to see if anyone has suspicions about what my Myers-Briggs or
Yeah, I forget what you are. I'm ENFJ, which I looked up. It's
okay.
extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging.
Oh,
Um,
right, duh, okay.
wow, you judging. Oh, right. No, I'm
Judging.
kidding.
Yeah,
I forget what
no.
you
But
were. I want to say that you were like an I. I want to say that you were an INFP or INFJ. I forget
it's really okay, it's really
because you
weird.
told me before.
It's like it depends on the day, it literally depends on the day. I'm always between actually, no, because recently I took it and I was an INTP. It's like
INTP.
it always changes on the day. It's either an INFJ or an INFP. But then recently I took it again and I was an INT something. Again, depending on the day. But I
Hmm.
don't know. If anyone likes Enneagram, I like it from a psychological standpoint. If
Yeah,
you want to know my
psychological.
type, guess it because it's really funny. I'm always between two and I still have no idea which one I am. But anyway,
I'm
I use that as an
yeah.
example. I totally like derail us, but I use that as an example of like we put people under camps all the time. And
Like
sometimes
we
it's like
just did to
harmless.
ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Like sometimes it's harmless or it's useful for some sort of like
Mm.
like a psychological perspective. Because I find that knowing my Myers-Briggs actually helps me like understand the way I
Understand
respond to
certain things about
things a lot.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Enneagram to a degree, but I tend to think that the Myers-Briggs is more like I don't know, it like makes more sense to me. But there are some things about the Enneagram that I think makes a lot of sense psychologically. Some people I think tie it to faith a little too much,
Yeah.
but and I know that there's been some like chatter about like the weird like origins, but there's also chatter about the weird origins of yoga. So that's again like a whole like a
Yeah.
thing for a different day. But from a psychological standpoint, purely like those two things, I think those are
Hmm.
like camps that can actually be beneficial to put
Hmm.
yourself under. But in things like faith itself, like when you investigate it and
Hmm.
see that like the camps of like the head faith and the heart faith, like are actually kind of detrimental. Like those are
Hmm.
camps that we like do not want to put ourselves under.
Exactly.
It's great to look at like being reason like having a lot of
Hmm.
ability to reason well as like a strong suit or like having a really deep emotional connection with the Lord and like using it to guide other people who don't have that, like my grandma to me, and some of my best friends. Like that's a good thing to look at as a strength. But you know, it's not something we also shouldn't be like building our personalities off of one thing, right? Like our personality
Exactly.
should be defined by uh, I'm a child of Christ, not I am an oboist, right? Like it's
Hmm.
part of who I am, but I define myself by
As a
God, not
Christian.
not the oboe,
Yeah,
and not
exactly.
any way that I think, and not by the way that my faith runs. So
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think that was a great way to tie everything off. Today's topic was, I think, a little bit, or today's discussion, I think, was a little bit shorter, but at the same time, I think that we,
did we want
I
it to
feel,
be 45 minutes long?
did
No.
we want it to be 42 minutes long like it normally is? Probably not. And I apologize to anyone who's seen those videos
This is
in its
big
entirety. Sorry.
it's not even Issa's big fat mouth, it's Issa's big fat brain that doesn't know how to turn words into like short
I
sentences.
literally just today, when I was trying to just do a short little like announcements video, I was like, I'm gonna stop talking because if I don't, I'm just gonna keep rambling like I'm doing right now. Like it's just, but yeah, no, this is what we do if you hadn't realized. When we just keep talking, and that's why when we talk, like after we end this like video, we're probably going to be on here until I literally have to go pick up my sister.
Mhm.
Um, because that's what we
Don't be
do.
friends with us. You'll
What?
die. I said, don't be friends with us. You'll die of like exhaustion from listening
Yeah.
to our annoying brains. Yeah, it's like again like a whole thing for another time. But like I've been thinking, what's going on with my voice? I've been thinking so much recently about like why that is. Like I'm one of those people who doesn't talk a lot but thinks like an insane amount. So
Oh
when I
yeah.
do, yeah, so like when I do open my mouth, it's like like there's
Yeah.
5 months of me like pondering something and you're like blinking at me like are you done? And like the 20th hour of me I'm working on
I'm
it.
just sitting there with my watch. I'm
It's
like
like really hard for me to
checking my
figure
phone.
out. Oh yeah. I don't know why it is, but it's like a Herculean effort for me to like find the right words for my thoughts. I don't know.
No,
It's a
I get
little
that too. I try so like it's so bad because sometimes I sound like I can't speak English, and it's not because I can't, it's because I literally have my mind goes like this fast, but my mouth can only go so fast, and I know that I do talk fast, but I talk a lot slower than I think because I just think that fast, and I'm
Yeah.
just like,
It's
I
it's it's so funny because 'cause we're like the opposite. My brain doesn't move fast at all. It just, like, hosts 700 things at the same time.
Mhm.
I think that's partly why my memory is good. It's just, like, it thinks about a bunch of things at once, and so because of that, it's really hard for me to, like, put words on it, and so it's so funny. We have, like, the same issue, but for, like, different reasons.
Different reasons.
We'll have to talk about it another time, but for
Yeah, for sure.
research purposes, people watching this, who still watching this right now, the real ones, um, my realizing of that came out of I was reading an article that was like really insane about some dude who realized that like not everyone has a voice going in their head.
The
I'm
internal
really
monologue?
interested to know. Yeah, I'm really interested to know if you got to this part and you're listening to me speak right now, please comment and tell me if you have like if you think with a voice because I don't think with a voice and I thought it was insanity when I heard that people think with a voice. Like
I
I
didn't know
literally
that you
heard
don't
someone
have one because I have an internal monologue. I literally
I hate
oh my gosh, wait, this
that.
is gonna
I
be a whole
have
new discussion
two.
later on.
I also found I did some like light polling like on my Instagram and like asking my friends in person. I found that like almost every single time there's someone who doesn't have a voice, it's a female. It's like there are some guys that I know, but it's like almost always it's a
Mhm.
girl who doesn't have, and that's just like interesting to me. So I don't know. I literally had someone I was talking with two people about it, and one of them was like, "Yeah, like when I wake up in the morning, my brain is like, okay, brush teeth, and then now it's time to go downstairs and eat breakfast." And I was like, "What?
I think
Like
it's
you
because I
haven't?"
talk to myself a lot that I just am always doing that sounds terrible to put in I talk to myself, but I'll
Yeah,
just be like, "Oh, now
one
I
of
have
my
to go
friends is like,
downstairs, now I have to do this."
You have it like you just have it going like
Yeah,
throughout the
like, I'm
day.
like, "Oh my gosh, now I have to go, like, do this video with Issa." Ugh, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, that's what the first guy that I talked to about it, that's exactly what he said. And I know someone else who was like, "Yeah, sometimes, like, I refer to myself as we." And I was like, "Blink twice if you need help." But he cleared it up and he was like, "No, it's just the mon." It
It's just the
wasn't like
voice that just keeps going.
yeah, I thought it was so funny. I was like, "You sound crazy, but, like, I know you're not. Like, I know what
Mhm.
you're getting at." So that was just so funny.
Okay.
So, yeah, tell me, please tell me if you have an internal monologue
In the
and expand
comments.
as much as you want if you want, because I just think it's very interesting and I've been
Mhm.
thinking about it a lot since, so
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Today's discussion was definitely probably one of my favorites because one, I think it was the most well thought out, and two, because it's a topic that I think affects a lot of people. And yeah. So I hope you guys all have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you all later. I always feel so weird ending these instead of at the end of the video, but
do you want me to do a stupid dance or something?
okay, bye everybody. God bless.
Bye.